Good evening, everyone. I'm Archit Seshadri. Thanks so much for watching WION, World is One News. Let's take a look at the top stories making headlines here in South Asia and around the world. The BJP revived the Ram Temple issue as a poll plank in the state of Uttar Pradesh and promises jobs for all as well as development in its election promises. Bollywood director Sanjay Leela Bansali stops his film shoot in the state of Rajasthan a day after he was assaulted by a group protesting against his film. U.S. President Donald Trump signs an executive order meant to prevent radicals from entering the U.S., but lots of confusion emerging with regards to the travel ban. In sports, Serena Williams beats her sister Venus to win her 7th Australian Open title and sets a record of 23 Grand Slams. Big news at the top of the hour. Qatar Airways is among the first to officially put the new U.S. immigration and travel rules into effect. An advisory put up on the airline's website with regard to Muslim entries include Sudan, Syria, Libya, and Iraq. States that only travelers with specific documents can now travel to the United States. This goes into effect immediately. It includes many folks, but does exclude professionals, students, and tourists from these 7 countries, this temporary travel ban. To get more perspective on this, we're going to go straight to our newsroom. Jessica Taneja, who's standing by. But first, let's check in with Glenn Carle joining us live from Boston. Glenn, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Glenn, you know, this confusion that's now emerging in the U.S. causing a lot of confusion for travelers. What is the latest that we're hearing at this hour?
Well, there are 7 countries that are on the ban. It's supposedly for 4 months, quote, temporary, unquote. And there are formally exceptions, for, as you have pointed out, for professionals and students. But already we are hearing that the exceptions are being lost in the wash of the chaos and the fear created, and that people with valid visas and who meet the categories of exception have also already been turned away. So this is a shocking development. It's also illegal. In 1965, the Civil Rights Act made it illegal to discriminate on the issuance of visas and immigration based on nationality. So I expect it will be challenged in the courts, but that's where things stand.
And, you know, certainly this news certainly of concern for many folks, students, those from those 7 countries, as well as working professionals. This is a temporary ban, as we understand it, from these 7 countries. For those people who are from those countries or expecting visitors, what can we expect in the coming months?
Well, I think it's a dangerous thing for you or me or anyone to use the term and focus our conscious attention at all on the characterization of, quote, temporary, because that then misleads and soothes, and maybe it will be temporary. But it's also a time-tested way to allay opposition by somebody, is to profess that something is temporary and not that serious, and we will work things out, while proceeding with totally unacceptable policies. So it is formally temporary, but it is quite alarming, quite alarming. How things will play out, gosh, we're in an historic moment.
All right, Glenn, just stand by for a moment. We're going to bring our viewers up to speed now to sort of give us perspective on this story. Let's go to Twitter and see what the Twitter, Roddy, are talking about. That Jessica Taneja is standing by in our newsroom right now with the very latest. Again, Qatar Airways posting this travel warning on its website, limiting the travel to folks coming into the U.S. from those 7 Islamic countries. The new rule certainly could impact professionals, students, and tourists. Jessica, you've been monitoring the social media world to see what people are tweeting about. What's the latest you can tell us with regards to this latest announcement?
Well, Archit, a lot of people are condemning this particular move since Trump has been talking about, and he did take an executive order to ban immigrants from the U.S. soil. But let me take you across to the first airline that has actually released a travel alert, so to say, and saying that the changes to entry requirements to the United States, specifically mentioning, if I could just point out here, saying that nationals from these countries may travel to the U.S. only if they are in possession of a permanent resident card. Now, these countries include Sudan, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Iran, Iraq, and Yemen. Now, looking at the categories, it's very interesting, is where the A1 and A2, which is the government officials and the immediate family. Then second, coming back to the CU, which is the travel to the UN, and the G1 and G2, which are the representatives and the employees of international organizations. Then G3 and G4, representatives to and the employees of international organizations. Then, of course, NATO. This certainly has shaken, a lot of people across, and a lot of people who are boarding flights right now are left in a tizzy, as to since this ban has been imposed. Archit.
All right, Jessica, thank you for that latest update. Again, to give us perspective, Qatar Airlines has recently posted this update on its website, one of the first airlines. We're now going to go straight to our West Asia Bureau Chief, Anshul Vora, who is now tracking this as well. Anshul, certainly many countries impacted, millions of travelers sort of facing the brunt of Trump's executive order. What do we know this hour?
Well, there is a lot of confusion about what this ban actually means. This ban has been imposed for 90 days. If I can continue, the ban has been imposed for 90 days by the Trump administration. That's what the executive order says. And the official reason that's been given is so the American government can put in place proper measures to ensure that no terrorists are crossing in. Though in an interview, Donald Trump recently has spoken about how these people in Iran and Iraq are all with ISIS. Again, a highly controversial statement without much basis in facts. So lots of confusion. If you're banning people from these countries, why are the airlines stopping them, stopping people who have valid visas? Are they not supposed to come back home now? Are they not supposed to be entering the country that they're living in the case of the green card holders? What about people who got work visas, who got travel visas? Can they not just enter now? So if you are implementing it from the word go, the moment you pass the order and it's supposed to be implemented, did you not think about millions of people who are living in your country and are American citizens? So there are many, many serious concerns here, many serious issues. And we've just got to wait and watch out to obtain more clarity. But this is causing and will continue to cause a lot more confusion for the travelers and travelers who are of these nations, and also people of with the origin in these nations but are American citizens. So the Trump administration needs to prompto very quickly provide more clarity.
All right, Anshul, stand by. We're going to come back to you in just a moment. We're also getting reports that several passengers from some of those countries were actually stopped from boarding a flight in Egypt. So let's go back to Glenn Carle, who's standing by with regards to this. Looks like Egypt, Cairo, is certainly already making its mark, implementing this travel ban. We don't know how many of the other countries in West Asia have, or when will they be rolling this out. Certainly a nightmare for travelers from those 7 countries, even though this is a temporary travel ban.
Well, I hear reports, in addition to Egypt, that this has taken effect. The order is effective worldwide, and that there are instances elsewhere than Egypt. I think Turkey was an example I heard, similar to the one that you cited in Egypt. If I could say that the comments of our colleague are, if anything, too rational. I mean, everything she says is correct, and I agree. And yes, the matters must be clarified. But we have to underline how historically exceptional this is, and frankly, what an outrage it is. It's clearly illegal. I'll give one example. All of the reasons stated by Trump have no basis whatsoever in fact, which means that they are actually lies or delusions. There are 12,132 Syrian refugees who have been allowed into the United States as of January 1st of this year. 0 of them have been arrested or have any record whatsoever, indication from the intelligence services of any connection at all with anything extremist or that poses a danger to the United States. The quote extreme vetting that Trump talks about is nonsense. It takes 2 years already on average, for a refugee to get through all of the roadblocks and procedures and controls that the United States uses now to make certain that no hostile, dangerous person enters the United States. Of the 1 million refugees who have come to the United States or immigrants in the last several years, I believe the answer is literally 0 of them are considered by the intelligence services and law enforcement agencies to have posed or to pose any threat of terrorism. It's a crazy law that is outrageous. I'm sorry to get so worked up, but it's just shocking.
All right, Glenn, we're going to come back to you in just a moment. Let's now go back to our West Asia Bureau Chief, Anshul Vora, who's standing by. Anshul, you know, this impacting those folks in 7 countries, Sudan, Syria, Libya, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, many of those countries and many of those folks who either are students who work there or are visiting now, at least for the next 90 days, sort of stranded. And we're seeing that in Egypt, many of those people who were headed to New York recently on a flight on Egypt Air were stopped. Certainly looks like those executive orders are being analyzed very heavily by these airports and airlines.
Well, you know, that's absolutely correct. And while there is that convenience to these travelers, I think the problem is much bigger here. When Donald Trump passes this executive order, and at the risk of perhaps editorializing the story a little bit, which I should not, but it certainly is being seen in West Asia as something as Donald Trump killing the American dream. There are a lot of people in West Asia, Chit, who believe in the American dream. They go to America for a better life. They go there to study. They go there to work. They like the values that that country has been propagating of freedom, of choice, of freedom of expression. So when a Trump administration, the new American president, passes this order, essentially they're killing the dream for a lot of these people in the world, but certainly in West Asia. How are these secular modern people now supposed to turn around and look at some of their regimes in some of these countries that continue to be dictatorial and say that you're wrong and I prefer these values, even though I abide by the laws of your country, or I like the fact that I've originated in whether it's Libya, whether it's Syria, whether it's Iraq, but I prefer those values. What are these people now supposed to turn around and say? So this is a much bigger story out there for Donald Trump to think that everybody coming from these countries is a terrorist. Glenn Carle there was talking about how that is A, factually wrong, and B, morally wrong for Donald Trump to do. And a lot of people, agencies in the United States of America are certainly going to take this up. The big question for Americans is, and you've lived there for several years, to find out, you know, whether this is against the Constitution. American Constitution is one of the most promising constitutions as far as liberty of an individual goes, as far as freedom of faith goes. So there are bigger questions here that we've got to also be worrying about as Donald Trump has passed this order and really causes a huge amount of uncertainty for these millions of people who are living there, who are traveling to America, but also in terms of what does America now stand for.
Anshul, you brought up a really good point about that, not just for these countries, but for many other countries, even here in South Asia, those who want to have the American dream, who want to move to the United States for that land of opportunity. And this type of message, this executive order that Trump has not put out to ban these folks from these 7 Muslim countries. You've been on the ground in West Asia, traveling extensively to Turkey, Lebanon. What is the ground reality there? What is the chatter among the people there with what Trump is, many of the things he talked about during the election campaign, now it seems like they're coming into fruition just a little bit more than a week after he was inaugurated?
A little bit of disappointment and certainly disbelief, because a few days ago I was talking to a lot of people on the ground in Lebanon, and they would say, including the experts, that Trump's idea is to get rid of ISIS and he's going to come down strong on them. The only hope is that as he does that, he does not end up killing a lot of civilians and collateral damage, because in a book that apparently Donald Trump has written himself, purportedly, I mean, he says he has written it, that he wants to bomb ISIS anywhere and everywhere it is to get rid of them, which essentially means that there would be a lot of collateral damage. But this was the chatter a few days ago. Now it's completely changed. There is certain disappointment. They would have expected Donald Trump halfway to do it, but there were equal number of people who were hoping that this would be just election rhetoric, and at the end he would go ahead and do it. But he has. So that in a sense, there are a lot of people who are mocking Donald Trump. There are a lot of people who are disappointed. There are a lot of people who are in disbelief, and they essentially can't seem to understand what does Donald Trump want? Is he saying that all the people in these countries are terrorists? Is he trying to begin a religious war? Is he trying to make things worse? Because there'll be many spin-offs of this. It won't be just one. If Donald Trump is, not if, he is doing it, he's essentially trying to tell a whole lot of people that they come from terrorist nations, that he needs to protect Americans from these people. And when he goes ahead and says he's going to be prioritizing the Syrian Christians, the minority refugees from Syria, as and when he again takes these refugees in, it's going to be the Christians, means that he essentially is making this a geopolitical situation into a religious war, something that I've heard in many parts of West Asia that a lot of people, a lot of well-meaning, modern, secular West Asians fear.
All right, Ancha, we're going to get back to you in just a bit, but let's go to Glenn on the same question with regards to that, the American dream that many migrants have to come to the land of opportunity, to sort of build a new life and really live that American dream. Trump's order now, a little bit more than a week since he's taken office, he's restricted these 7 countries, again, as we mentioned, Sudan, Syria, Libya, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, these 7 countries, a temporary ban for the next 90 days. We're seeing that information coming from the Qatar Airways website. What type of message, the ground reality, does this send to not only the folks who are there in the United States, but other countries, other students, other working professionals who want to come to the United States? How are they going to react?
Well, for the United States, immigrants and foreigners, important as the issues are for them, all of which have been powerfully pointed out by our colleagues and you, and I hope myself here, nonetheless, important as those things are, they're secondary to what the nature of the United States is. And this is a complete, Trump's announcement and policy is a complete betrayal. And not just a betrayal, it's an undermining of what America stands for. President Reagan, I can paraphrase, and I was not actually a fan at all of President Reagan, but he said, America is not about where you are from. It's about where you are going and what you do. It's not about origins, it's about destinations. And what Trump has just done is change all of it.
All right, Glenn, and another question to ask you with regards to this, airports and airlines, what is their policy, the protocol? We've seen Qatar, soon certainly many other airlines are probably going to post similar information on their websites, letting travelers know the rules and regulations. Well, what about airports? What type of protocol or processes are we going to see in the coming days, and even around airports, especially in West Asia, many of those countries? Right now, we know Egypt has been strict, stopping some passengers getting on board an Egypt air flight, but it seems like the others are likely to follow suit.
Yeah, well, there's a little garbling going on. I think we have some crossed lines, I'm afraid, but I got most of that. I don't think anybody knows, probably not the customs officials themselves, what the formal protocols are yet. We've had reports from you already, multiple instances of a blanket ban on anyone who seems to be from these countries, when that is not supposed to be the case, even with this law. So how that will play out, I don't know. But clearly, the way it has gone up to now is that American authorities try to issue the visa or deny it before a prospective traveler even gets to the airport. You have to apply and so on, so that there isn't the burden in the customs bureaus or offices in the United States of countless thousands of people who have to be turned away. So an enhancement of that, I don't know. I don't think anybody actually knows at this point.
All right, Glenn, we'll check in with you in just a bit. Let's now go to our correspondent, Jessica Taneja, who's standing by in the WION newsrooms. Jessica, we know that Qatar Airlines has posted these details out. Also, we're learning that 5 passengers from Iraq, 1 more from Yemen, were stopped from boarding an Egypt Air flight from Cairo to New York. This, of course, after Trump stopped the entry of citizens from those 7 Muslim-majority countries. Again, we'll tell them to Sudan, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Iran, Iraq, and Yemen. This ban, of course, being temporary, but Trump says this would give enough time for the Trump administration to develop stricter policies when it comes to visitors, immigrants, and refugees. Airports say that those passengers also arriving in Cairo, some of those ones on transit visas, were stopped and redirected back to their home countries. Certainly a lot of confusion happening there, not only in the United States, but even in West Asia. So let's now go to Jessica to get perspective on the chatter happening on social media. What are you seeing in terms of comments in Twitterati?
Well, Archit, there have been certainly some interesting, comments coming in from the Tweeple right now. Let me take you to a couple of those, which say, one of them says that how many people are subjected to Trump's, travel ban just won't be able to show up to work tomorrow. And then apart from that, some saying also, as a matter of fact, that every time you use your iPhone today, remember that Steve Jobs' biological father was a Syrian immigrant, #travel ban. And just not that, we're also looking at a couple of reactions where people are saying that these are the countries marked in green and other colors where Trump organization has done business or had companies to do so, which apparently has been in the past. So these are interesting reactions from people. People are saying that in anticipation of Muslim travel ban, civil rights groups, in fact, one of them has actually tweeted saying that civil rights groups are now organizing an emergency rally in New York City's Washington Square Park today at 5 p.m. looking at this particular development from the Trump administration. Archit.
All right, let's now go back to Glenn again. Glenn, let's get your thoughts on, this move that's happening there. We're seeing people taking to social media. We just actually read a tweet not too long ago. A 71-year-old father who was boarding a Qatar Airways flight from Los Angeles. He was being sent back. He is unable to come back to the United States, being sent back to Iraq because of all that's happening. So it's not just in Cairo that we're seeing this. It's all over airports across the U.S. and certainly in many airports across West Asia. What are the likely implications in the coming days, despite this being a temporary 90-day travel ban?
Well, this is part of the whole phenomenon of Donald Trump and the populist, frankly, racist and xenophobic movement born from the Great Recession and the social stresses of globalization and the crisis of 2008 that's brought Trump into office. And I have said many times in public and in my columns, and I'm not the only one, that America is facing the greatest crisis to its institutions, to our country, since 1861. Not since World War II, when Hitler was terrible but didn't pose an existential threat ultimately to the United States. Not since the turmoils of Vietnam. Not since anything except the time when our country actually split in half and had a hideous civil war. The country is riven. I know many, many people who physically felt ill on the morning of the election, and many others since then who are anxious and literally have trouble sleeping or focusing on their work. This is a huge social, political phenomenon and crisis. Now, there are many people who support Donald Trump, but the country is terribly divided. And the first march, the day after his election that we saw, I think is only the beginning of similar phenomena going forward. I would not be surprised to see a mass movement to protest this redefinition, frankly, of what it is to be an American.
All right, Glenn, thank you so much for your perspective, as well as our West Asia Bureau Chief Anshul Vora and our correspondent Jessica Taneja giving us perspective with regards to all of this. And that does it for our bulletin for right now. I'm Archit Seshadri. Thanks so much for joining us. Good night.